I need all the wins, yeah. Ain't no L's, I gotta get it, no call and quits, yeah. Gotta keep on moving no matter how hard it gets, yeah. Better move out the way, cause I'm coming with harder hits. My head is as hard as a brick, but I'm harder than all of this. You better move, you might get knocked out, knocked out. You better move, you might get knocked out, knocked out. You better move, you might get knocked out, knocked out. You better move, you might get knocked out, knocked out. My heart on my sleeve, stress, on my greed. That's how I get it. Success ain't no given. Some days I don't eat, I don't sleep. When I'm focused, I'm dangerous. Down, wonder when I'm anxious. Ain't no limit till I tank. I'm running on fumes. The opposition don't amaze. The roads racing through the pavement. Get your hands out of my bag. I know that's because I've been in it. I don't need to brag. I guess that's what happens when you taking care of your business. But some family, you do the math. I'm out of my pocket. Houston, we got a problem. I ain't perfect. Let them watch me elevating. Got them nauseous. Cause I'm the pilot in the cockpit. Nose diving in the house. And woo. Watch out, get ahead. Watch out, get ahead. Watch out, get ahead. Woo. Watch out, set it up, bet you I shut it down, watch out, get a win. I don't think you really wanna come against the winner, got a finger run up in on a grenade. I ain't never been there when you think you compare, I'm alive, but the winner about the cage. I need all the wins, yeah. Ain't no L's, I gotta get it, no call and quits, yeah. Gotta keep on moving no matter how hard it gets, yeah. Better move out the way, cause I'm coming with harder hits. My head is as hard as a brick, but I'm harder than all of this. You better move, you might get knocked out, knocked out. You better move, you might get knocked out, knocked out. You better move, you might get knocked out, knocked out. You better move, you might get knocked out, knocked out.
Good morning. Who's awake? Who's kind of awake? Who stayed out way too much last night? I know you did. All right, I am so excited for this lovely, intimate conversation Sunday morning about what is the future of being online going to look like, especially in one of my favorite dimensions, shopping. And we are joined with two people who have, for the last decade plus, been thinking about the architecture, the opportunity, and the innovation of what our experiences online look like. So I'm excited to invite to the stage Kate Klonick, Nellie Mensah, join us. Let's. All right, come. Oh my gosh. We're not going to ever get off the stage. I just want to warn all of you. Our pre-call for this was like such a gab fest.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited for our chat today. All right, I want to just level set with like, where are we in the world right now? You see a lot of hype around AI agents, of like, AI agents are going to change everything about how we shop. It's going to do it for you. But I don't know about you. When I've tried them, it's kind of like talking to a phone tree where you're like, operator, help me, someone else, I don't want to do this. We've seen this pattern before where in the beginning something looks slow and clunky and not really living up to its promise or hype, and then all of a sudden there's another dimension to this. So tell me about where AI agents are today versus where the hype says it will be, and what are the ways that behavior is actually changing right now if it's not AI agents? And Nellie, we're going to start with you.
Excellent. So hi, everyone. I'm Nellie Mensah. I head up Emerging Solutions at LVMH, which is a very contradictory thing to think about. And I think what's really interesting with LVMH is oftentimes something that feels like maybe a disadvantage of working at the pace of luxury actually becomes a benefit because it allows you to slow down and be really critical about the technologies that we're seeing. And so my job is oftentimes saying no more often than we say yes. And so we're starting to see something really similar with this idea of AI agents. I think, first of all, we still don't even have a single definition of what an agent is, first of all. So I don't even know how we talk about whether they're effective or not. Is it just talking to an LLM? Some people just refer to that as an agent. Is it fully automating and executing an action for you, which is, I think, on the tech side. When people say agentic, they just imagine an agent that actually researches, shops, adds things to your cart, has it delivered, or is it somewhere in between where it's like a chatbot that you're talking to? So there really isn't that much of a definition, and I'm definitely in the wait and see phase. We haven't really seen it kind of, perform very seamlessly yet, and I think in the luxury world, you can't afford to have bad experiences, and so we're just waiting for it to be more of a seamless type of technology. And I think the other thing to think about is if you're, in this luxury experience and you're, let's say, buying something very special, maybe you just graduated and you want your first handbag, or it's an anniversary and you're picking up a beautiful piece of jewelry, you actually really do want to talk to a human in that case. And so for us, again, we're just kind of still waiting to see when we can rely on the agents, maybe to help out in the background, but not necessarily putting it in the face of our clients yet.
Makes sense. Kate?
Yeah, so I'm actually a kind of a bigger picture kind of person. I don't work in consumer kind of goods at all. I watch kind of the space online and how it's moving and how it is interacting with how our online ecosystem and information ecosystem is interacting with things like consumerism. So, for example, or not just things like consumerism, but things like any type of market. And so there has been this huge trend of how people search, and how people search and look for LLMs, chatbots, all types of things to do this type of work for them and to condense their preferences into into new shopping experiences and into things like if I want something really special that is going to appreciate in value for my child, or something like that. What is the gift that what are kids buying right now? Or what are a 17-year-old from the Upper West Side buying right now, or something like that. And so I think that is a huge part, and that has that part that you're kind of dealing with and thinking about a lot has these interesting downstream effects because there are on the information ecosystems, because it changes how advertisers are surfacing. And where advertising is moving, and thus kind of how the internet looks and feels to everyone who is on it. So one of the things that you might have heard recently is that there has been kind of this move towards search engine optimization, which was after kind of the era of the internet. there was this huge decline in traditional types of advertising, a broad kind of advertising, a move towards behavioral advertising, and a move towards optimizing whatever it was that you were selling for an algorithm that was mostly Google or mostly something else. And now there is not a click-through culture anymore. Click-through culture of people looking into advertising and to a search engine, getting something and then searching the results and clicking on those results individually, which changes how each of those pages that depended on that click advertise and depended on the advertising that was generated from that click, how they like made money. And so there's all these downstream effects of like agentic shopping, agentic AI, like changing actually how other types of things like journalism are funded. Because there's kind of this shift towards like these landing pages and things having a different type of ad model.
I'm going to come back to that topic of how sort of broader consumer logic shapes the public goods we consume and what that means for platform governance. But I'm going to start with you on just clicking into luxury a little bit more, right? So you've worked at the intersection of luxury retail, emerging tech for a very long time now. And this tension is emerging, right, of human-crafted experiences seeming luxury while everyone else gets to have AI slot bucket. But at the beginning of your career, you have really found ways to enhance in-person consumer experience using technology, and I'd love if you would just ground us in your Sephora examples.
Yeah, so I was like, which beginning? So I did work at a nuclear plant at some point.
That's true. You have a lot of beginnings. You have a beginning in
building
this
good
space.
UX for maintenance, which is very
true.
different from the luxury space.
Beginning in this space.
Yes. So my background is in engineering, and I got exposed to kind of all of the technologies when I was studying. So was very familiar with kind of immersive tech. I was a VR developer, kind of got early exposure into like what cryptography meant. So I was like, oh, actually this kind of makes sense when the hype was happening. But I also very much appreciate kind of creativity and art, and I'm an illustrator. And so I was looking for an industry that could kind of mix my passion for technology and for creativity. And so luxury and retail actually ended up being that space. And so when I started at Sephora leading their innovation lab, we were trying to figure out where does technology actually help. And again, that philosophy of not putting it into your consumer's face was really important. And so Sephora did a lot of experiments with kind of augmented reality makeup try-on, which actually worked really, really well for us. But then what we realized was most of the time when someone is at the store, we call like shopping for makeup a two-handed sport, right? So you have your shopping bags in one hand, you're swatching lipsticks in the other, you don't have your phone out, and you don't want to have your phone out. So what we did was we actually focused on the store associate, and that's where you can really unlock value with technology, because you have someone who comes in, there is like hundreds of thousands of products in the store, and you need to have just really deep expertise in any one area. It could be skincare, it could be hair, it could be foundation matching. And so what we realized was oftentimes when someone comes in and the store associate that they're talking to doesn't look like them, they actually don't trust them, right? So if you're, let's say you have like mature skin and you come in and there's like a 17-year-old being like, I think you should get this cream, they're just not gonna have the same level of confidence. So we just started building out a suite of products that were using technology to help the store associate have the knowledge, come across as the expert, and the clients also trusted them. And so the one example that Nabi is talking about is we put in place, we call it the Advisor Assistant app, and it was also equipped with a special camera that attaches to the phone that took high-resolution photos of your skin. And so that used computer vision to analyze your skin quality. Very depressing, but very compelling. It would like count the number and depth of lines, the size of your pores, like the oil levels, and so it could recommend skincare for you, but it would also analyze the color of your skin and recommend a foundation. And so when I came in, Sephora had a similar tool, and it used Pantone to kind of color match, and we're like, this is not working. The store associates hate using it. It's not really giving us the right color recommendation. So we started looking for another partner to develop that algorithm. And so of course we found a startup, their hardware was really good, and they were like, yeah, we've tested this color matching algorithm on over 500 subjects. It's going to be, you know, amazing. And so we tested it and it wasn't working. And so this is where, again, with technology, you really have to have the courage to say, look, we're going to pause. Let's figure out what's going on here. Turns out the 500 subjects were all Japanese, right? And so this is launching in America. And so we're like, okay, what do we do? Sephora is all about inclusivity. So we literally had to basically build up our own data set. So we had store associates from all over North America and Canada send in their skin tones and the products that they wear, and we had to delay the project, retrain the entire algorithm to actually then have the data set that we needed to make color foundation recommendations. And then the other two things that we did, one was traditionally existing systems that match your foundation, and like, okay, how dark or light you are, and are you kind of like yellower or pinker? But again, because I had this background as an artist, I was like, but color always has 3 dimensions, and you cannot describe color without also talking about how saturated it is. And what we found was when you add this dimension of saturation, so meaning, is it a little bit on the grayish side, or is it a really, really rich tone? That's when we started to get other ethnicities included. So for example, darker skin tones tend to be really, really saturated, so you really need to explain kind of that dimension. But like Middle Eastern Greek are more olive undertones, and that's actually really desaturated. So we had to do that. Oh. And then the other last thing, sorry, I just like this example, and I will make fun of engineers a little bit. So the other thing we found was the products that were being recommended were still not being accepted by the customer, like, I don't want to wear this. And the engineer's like, I do not understand. We have a perfect scan of their skin. We have a perfect scan of the foundation, and we're matching it exactly. There's like, if you measure like the delta, there's nothing. It's so accurate. And we're like, wait a minute. The girlies and other foundation-wearing people don't want a foundation that is exactly their skin tone. They want a foundation that enhances their skin tone. Oh. So for example, when people are like very red, the foundation has to be yellower. Or if they live in a region where it's very trendy to be tanner, they go up. If they live in a region where it's trendier to be paler, you go down. So we added a layer of that personalization and preference, and we always adjusted the color before we found the product for them. So again, I think unless you have a background in things like color theory, or you know the beauty space really well, you can't just say, oh, well, we have the most accurate match ever. So you do need that context and that humanity added. And I love this example because it just really shows how you do need the combination of the art and science in order to deliver something amazing with tech. And I think, again, in the luxury space, that's what we tend to try and do quite a bit more, is like look at those nuances.
I love that example for all of those reasons. And the moment in which there was an observation of like, hey, this isn't working, let's pause. Let's stop, let's fix it, let's talk to the right experts who aren't just the people that we might think like are the engineers and the developers, but that broader input of knowledge to actually get it right. So I love that. Thank you for sharing it. So Kate, the logic of advertising has always been part of journalism, and you're such an incredible observer of sort of journalism and journalism platforms. You were early in like internet publishing. But the way that platforms now mediate our experience of journalism is not always amazing and does not escape critique, right? You have algorithmically mediated consumption of journalism that for a long time we didn't quite realize, right? Because it was built, like journalism was being delivered through platforms that were optimized for advertising to sell you stuff, like Facebook and Facebook newsfeed. But now there's more awareness around that, right? There's more awareness that people are like, I'm not sure that I want to just receive whatever is being pushed to me in my feed. I want something more curated. What are the trends you're seeing in people's consumption of journalism on platforms? And bring in your experience on platform governance too.
Yeah, sure. So this is such a great question, and actually is a really interesting kind of dovetail of like how everything to a certain extent, even things that we think of like public facing, like public goods, like journalism or something like that, are actually consumer goods in so many ways. Because one of the things, and I'll just kind of start from a place of, over the last number of years, you might have heard a term really kind of come up, which is engagement. Like all of these platforms are driving you for engagement, maximizing engagement so they can maximize ad sales, everything else. But this is like one of the things, as someone who has studied like the history of media and the history of platforms, is like, this is not a new concept. This goes back to yellow journalism. This goes back to like, really like, there have always been sensationalist headlines. In fact, maybe they used to be more sensationalist. And there was always kind of this desire, this difficult relationship that journalism had with selling. Right? The idea that you're creating a public-facing good and a public record for something, but then you're also trying to essentially like support a business, right? And this is something that we are still struggling with and haven't figured out perfectly today. Now, one of the interesting things that has kind of happened over the last 25 years of social media and platform governance and kind of the journalism and media space is that like there was a rise in social media platforms being very, very large, like about 3 or 4, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube to a certain extent, and Twitter for a period of time, although questionably kind of not as large as the other 3. And there was a desire there to both drive engagement, but also not piss people off too much. There actually was not the kind of push for it was a very hard button to push because they wanted people to stay on the site and engage, but actually they were such large platforms that they had to reach a median of opinion and social norms, or reflect the social norms that you expected to see in the stories that you clicked on, in the things that you consumed. And so there was, again, a mix of what people clicked on, or what you could observe in their behavior, right, of how they stopped and hovered on things and saw how they consumed the media versus what they would tell you that they consumed in the media. And this delta has been one of the biggest changes in how kind of, in behavioral advertising online, and is really revealing because it is at one point kind of a public choice paradox in that there is the idea that you still have this choice to click on whatever you want. No one is making you, but there is like this kind of this nudge, the behavioral kind of nudge towards knowing you better than you know yourself and pushing you towards some type of kind of outcome or decision. What's been interesting in kind of, and we should talk, I don't know if we're gonna have time, but we should talk at some point about the line between algorithms and AI. Because that is actually something that is a lot more of a gradient than I think people understand. Like I was like looking at the AI perfume out here and I was like, and I did it and I loved it. I'm wearing it right now. But the
She smells great.
the one of the things I was thinking, I was like, this is just an algorithm. This is not actually. It's a slightly. This is just an algorithm. I mean, there's nothing AI about this. Like this isn't like. What is AI about this is maybe that this is like, and I was looking at actually kind of the system of how it was inputting data, that there was sliding scales, and that maybe and in many ways, I actually spent some time last night, like kind of like seeing how the definition, and you can maybe shed some light on this, between algorithm and AI shifts. Like when you start calling it one thing and not the other. But in media, this is something that's been happening for a long time. Show us the algorithm, show us why we're seeing things, show us why you're controlling our news feed in this way. And the answer is that like these are not static things, first of all, they change all the time. Second of all, they are not self-explanatory. Seeing the algorithm isn't going to necessarily tell you anything about how you're being manipulated. It's just going to tell you how things are measured and like maybe control like how those measurements happen, but those are so individualistic. And then third, like the effects of a highly personalized feed are very hard to kind of like explain what it is that is what. It's hard to know an optimization, for like a public square, for an information ecosystem of personalization to exposing you to things that you're not comfortable with in this kind of context. And I'm sure that this, like, and I was just like, I've never kind of, it hasn't overlaid to me how interesting until you said this Sephora example, like maybe that hot pink would look really good. Do you know what I mean? And that wouldn't be like something that would be, and that this is a very similar problem of like trying to decide when you push a person out of like a comfort zone and when you cater to their exact whims or whatever else. And I mean, they're two different spaces with two different sets of like kind of outcomes and consequences, but I think that it's very similar.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The definition thing is going to get even worse because I think in the public sphere, people are saying AI, but they mean generative AI.
Yes.
So even the kind of traditional like machine learning, like NLP, computer vision, like those nuances are disappearing. And people say AI, and they say it in a very derogatory way because they're thinking like generative AI slop. So we're starting, and like...
Or chatbots.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone's
So-
thinking about chatbots, because that's like the Turing test and like the way we have like imagined AI from like for the last 50 years.
Yeah, the definitions are definitely going to make it even harder to help people understand kind of what is good tech, what is actually helpful, and then there's this kind of like knee-jerk reaction of people like responding to any use of AI possibly negatively. And actually, I think that is going to make it harder for larger brands and companies to really embrace AI, and because they're just, one, really worried about obviously all like risk, security, IP, but also just the public reputation. Like the first thing that brands worry about is if we actually try something with AI, because so many people are against it, we're going to get backlash. So that prevents them from actually experimenting, which I think is a shame.
Yeah, that's a great point. I want to pick up on a thread here on the theme of taste, preference, and discovery. And I think one of the most profound aspects of sort of taste development is perusing, like curation, exploration, right? Like going, whether it's picking up a book or a new magazine or a newspaper at a bookstore, or like clicking on a link to something that you didn't expect, or searching in a store and saying like, actually, I like this. Oh, I think I like this. Like taste development through exposure is really important. And so when I see the sort of promise of what AI agents can do, of like, I'll know exactly what you like and then I'll go and fetch it, it feels like it's missing some aspect of like the cultivation of taste and discovery. And I'm curious about how you think about what that will look like in the future, if in fact we do deliver on this agentic shopping hellscape. That's my opinion of what agentic shopping is clearly. Get in there.
I'm like interested in this answer.
Somewhat a controversial take, possibly, and this is something that we used to talk about when we talked about even Web3 as well, and because Web3 also promised a democratization of taste and anyone can create what they want. A lot of people don't have taste. That is, or they think they don't have taste, which is actually kind of the same thing. So in the luxury world, so we believe that there are certain things that are just immutable about human behavior. And so there's this idea of signaling your belonging to a tribe, right? And kind of showing your affiliation with either a creative director or a brand that you want to show that you belong. So you actually don't necessarily want to fully express yourself. You want to wear the signifiers of belonging to that community, and that will never change. And so I think the reason the luxury industry is, always kind of will always be there is because people want to have those signifiers. They want to belong to certain circles. So that's kind of like one group. And then there is the other group that, to your point, they want to express themselves, they want to explore, they want to discover. But in the end, again, I still go back to this idea of almost having kind of like a Sherpa or a guide through that space, which is why we have so many stylists and, personal advisors who can actually help you. And many people like having that human who's like, oh, well, I know you really well. I think you would really like this particular outfit. Try on this hot lipstick. I know it seems like it's not you, but try it out. I do think that kind of another person knowing you and helping you discover is important. Or also this idea of like, you like a creative director, you like the aesthetic of a brand, and so you will just keep wanting to go there. So again, I don't know how AI will help. So unless you very intentionally code in serendipity, you are just going to start getting this narrowing of things fed to you, which really, really worries me, both kind of like professionally and in my personal life. Like, I don't want the same content fed to me over and over and over and over again. I do want the moments.
We don't want to taste monoculture. Like, what is the joy?
Which is already happening quite a bit.
I will say, though, that like what you're saying, so this is so interesting to listen, like you don't want monoculture, and like I love that you're saying this in like kind of in a consumer goods space, because one of the things that is the most controversial and creates the most controversy for social media platforms and search results and things like that in general is recommender systems. So there are two ways that you see content in your feed generally, and we're moving away from a social graph kind of like linked environment online, so things are less and less directly the people you follow, like your friends or influencers that you like. You will see whatever it is that they post in your feed. But increasingly, and for years, the move has been towards recommending you towards new content that based on the content that you view or the accounts that you follow, they think that you will like. And people either love this, and when they love it, it's an invisible service that they like kind of take for granted. And when they hate it, oh my God, do they really hate it? Like, do they like, and they're like, why the F is like Facebook showing me this? How dare they? And like, also I'm going to write an op-ed about how much I hate Facebook and like everything, right? You know, and so that is not to say that like, that's not to like let Facebook off the hook for doing this, but like that is their biggest margin of error, is the recommender systems. TikTok is incredibly good at this for like different reasons, and it's actually fascinating, which is that they flip the model to like take out from the base of what they're curating from, they take out the most kind of extreme and pre-screen the possibility of videos that you will see. So if there's so much content that if you have, and this is just these numbers, imagine them at a much higher scale, but if you have 100,000 videos, they are able to send reviewers out to like basically curate like a bunch of videos that are kind of going viral or doing certain types of things and pull 90,000 of those and cut 10,000 that will probably be marginal or kind of run a risk of like kind of really pissing people off. And then they can personalize your feed. And so actually like that is a type of proactive like moderation and curation that they are doing still with humans. It's not with like, I mean, it's assisted by like AI sorting and algorithmic sorting, but they are doing it with humans and they're pulling out kind of stuff and then they're serving it to you. Facebook, and they're changing this now, but Facebook's entire content moderation system was reactive. They would show you everything and kind of curate from the entire universe of possible things and show them to you, and then they would only remove things if people reported them as being removable. And so it was like a post hoc after the fact, after you were already pissed off, they would like remove a video or something. Frankly, it's a very kind of Chinese kind of management of an information ecosystem versus a U.S. management, like leave everything up until it makes someone mad, kind of First Amendment type of positioning, versus like a control the medium from the beginning, and have that be your message.
I spend an embarrassingly large number of hours on TikTok, unfortunately. It's working really well on me. Also, by the way, the irony of Nabiha saying she doesn't like monoculture and us showing up matching is not lost on me. This was not planned.
I feel like it's that moment of like, you think you picked that blue.
Yeah,
You didn't pick that
exactly.
blue from Devil Wears Prada.
Yeah. I just wanted to pick
please.
up on one thing that you were talking about, and this is something that a lot of our brands are looking at, again, because of the kind of advertising and analytics, but there's a really interesting shift happening where it's actually getting harder and harder to figure out what people are saying and doing online because the behaviors are changing. So whereas previously—
Moving to chat?
Moving to chat, moving to private forums, moving offline, moving into like WhatsApp and like Telegram communities, people are not as much posting from their own personal accounts. So if you look at social media like Instagram, it's either brands or influencers. So you actually really don't know what consumers want and are talking about. So it's becoming very challenging for brands to even understand what the sentiment is. Like the idea of like digital listening is becoming harder and harder because it's an echo chamber of you listening to influencers and key opinion leaders you actually sponsored. And so people are trying to figure out where then is the conversation going and where can you figure out what people are thinking about your brand, your product, and how do you, so does it go back to like good old consumer testing where you bring in, 20 people in a room and give them a candy and ask them if it tastes good? Like probably.
Ooh, I want to stick with this for a second, because where does that sort of consumer insight data come from? In your Sephora example, you have this existing touch point with human beings. They're coming into the store, you have that footprint, you can assess. You can also collect the data from store employees who are like, yeah, okay, I'll share my skin tone and the products I like with you. In this universe that we're going into, there's all the forces you described as well as the forces of like bot slop, right? It's like hard to know what's real and what's not online. So how do you see the future of this kind of assessment playing out?
Yeah, so this is actually going to touch on another topic that we talked about, which is like quiet tech or tech behind the scenes. So in the consumer space, a lot of this is still relying on good old panels where you recruit people, you ask them a particular type of question, you listen to their answers, and then that's kind of how you assess. And then depending on what type of product it is, it's harder and harder to find the right consumer, but it is now kind of becoming really important to talk to people. What's interesting is we were talking about how we use technology and AI, and so I'm a big believer in quiet tech or AI behind the scenes to make things faster, more efficient, so that all the high-touch interactions are actually happening between humans. So this is actually one of the things that we're looking into, and a big trend in startups is we're starting to see generative AI and traditional AI being used in consumer insights, where you basically set the topic for what you want to find out. AI will write out the questions for you, and then the AI will actually deliver the interviews. So before, you needed to schedule interviews. Maybe you had 2 people on the team, so it took you a really long time to actually get all the subjects through. But with AI, you literally send your subjects kind of an email link. They log in. AI is asking the questions, modifying them as needed, and recording your facial expressions as well. And so then you can have like thousands of these interviews in parallel as long as you have the subjects identified. And then the analysis of the information is so much faster because you can literally search, oh, did anyone talk about the taste of Hennessy in this conversation? And it finds you the exact interview, the exact clip, and you can rewatch it. And then also you can read facial expressions, and like creating the report of the trends of everything people talked about becomes much faster. So this is again where I think technology is amazing, because all of this labor that you would have spent doing something that's so mundane is eliminated, and you can actually spend the time thinking about your strategy and developing better products. And so that's a really interesting topic we're exploring.
Ooh, well, how does that intersect, and Kate, I'm gonna bring you into this too, how does that intersect with this, in some segments, growing public opposition to AI, right? Like, on one hand, you're relying on people to like click the link and then have something record their face and interact. They know it's not a human being on the other side. So do you see that as a headwind? If people are like, ew, I don't want to have anything to do with AI, I'm not gonna click this link, will that end up shaping the information you're getting and the people who are willing to participate?
I think it also depends on what it looks like. Some of the platforms I've seen just ask the question. It's not a bot, it's not like an avatar, it's just the text just shows up. Okay. So it actually feels less AI-y, if I'm honest. So I think we do have to think about like the design and the affordance of emerging tech, which is another favorite topic of mine. So I think there is a way to make it feel less automated and robotic, but still get the benefits out of it.
So I'm going to go to one way that I just have recently been kind of researching about, that I was really curious about, how with this problem of kind of AI slop, with this problem of not being able to trust sources or not knowing whether something is going to be a good recommendation or not, the things like Facebook and Google's information spaces that they put up ahead of elections. So this is like a very interesting question, which is like, you might assume, and this has been part of our ecosystem since, I think since 2008, that Facebook has been running, 2012, that Facebook has been running kind of voting, like vote today, here's where your polling place is, type of deliverables on kind of pushing for kind of democratic responsiveness and like information on candidates and things like that and party affiliations. And Google does a similar type of thing. And you might assume that all of that has been for years kind of like collated by algorithms or some kind of like AI. And now you would probably say AI if you asked surveyed 10 people on the street type of thing. They'd be like, oh, it's probably a computer that does it. No, it's like humans. It is literally teams of humans that work with local districts and do all of this to make sure and verify all of this information is correct. And it has been humans and it continues to be humans. And so this is actually something that I think is really fascinating, because there is also increasingly, if there was a reliance on AI, would we suddenly not, what would happen if that switched over? And it becomes so much more costly. It's so costly to do this, and these companies mint money. I'm not completely worried about this, but it is a weird public service that they provide, and we don't kind of recognize, and we would I think that people would probably like to preserve. And yet it is something that I don't think that we're ever going to be able to trust AI to do. There is something that has to be human about that kind of provision of information and the fact checking. Maybe you can have AI generate the initial kind of copy. That might save a lot of time. But all of it has to be fact checked, right? And all of it has to be sourced, and you have to call people on the phone and make sure that it's still happening. And election officials in the actual state. And so I think that this is kind of this interesting question of where we're going to find uses for AI and kind of bulk production, where that's going to cut labor and costs in another type of area, and then what that does to the price and the value that we place on actual human labor, and whether it becomes more valuable in certain types of spaces, whether real human experience is curated by a human. Will Etsy suddenly become a mix of personalized AI slop type of stuff, right? And
It already is, I think.
Yes,
actually.
no, it is. And but then also it is still a place of really people, if you really want something that is made, there's this woman who will take your hair, the fur from your dog, and turn it into a small bespoke animal that looks just like your dog. A small, she'll felt it into a tiny dog. That is not AI, that is a human, and that has this marketplace that is increasingly valuable, because people want to be I got this, I gave this to you because I found this thing for you that I think is perfect. And they don't want it to be AI. There will be kind of this quest for authenticity, for human touch that becomes super, super valuable.
I did see that on TikTok, by the way, the very cute animal.
Did you? Yeah.
Yeah, we think about this all the time as well when it comes to kind of content creation. I think that this reminds me a lot of, maybe 10-ish years ago, where all of a sudden Fiverr and Upwork became a thing. This exactly the same conversations were happening. And
These are remote working sites, by the way, for people.
Where you would get, graphic designers giving you a logo for $5, right? And so a lot of graphic designers were this is terrible, this is awful. And so again, you did start seeing the bifurcation of the types of people who would hire a designer on Fiverr, because it's a small family business, you just want a logo really quickly. And then you had the really high-end designers that were hired by large companies that could still kind of afford to pay them the, hundreds of thousands that the expertise commands. And similarly, if you keep going back 5 years ago when desktop publishing became a thing, again, same. So now you can make your own flyer for your party, but you still need to hire an actual agency. So I think we're starting to see the same thing with AI content, where it will make content creation accessible for small, scrappy kind of startups or individuals who really want to have access to that technology, and it's a way for them to bootstrap their business or just get something out there. And to your point, the premium on handcrafted, hand illustrated, hand drawn, hand painted will still be there, but it won't be accessible to everyone.
Yeah, I want to take that and bring us into our last question so we have time for Q&A for folks. Both of you have so much experience watching previous tech hype cycles that sometimes play out the way we think, but usually not, right? Whether it was, we're going to use a VR for virtual try-on of everything, and you never have to go to the store, and that's not exactly what happened.
Cher had that in Clueless, the 90s.
I still want that rotating closet situation, or the promises of Web3 sort of morphing into something else. what have you learned about which innovations like actually stick and live up to the dream, which for AI agents, there's a lot of dreams being sold right now, and which ones are just good demos, but we can't really predict? And I'll let both of you take it, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Okay, yeah. Embarrassingly, I have ridden like every single one of those hype cycles in my career, from AR, VR, Web3, Metaverse, and now AI. So I don't think you can tell. So I don't think you should be in the game of predicting what's gonna stick. I think you should be in the game of processes and mindset. Mindset being agile and experimenting, and processes being have a way where you can test a bunch of things, and when you find something that works, that's the thing that you're gonna stick to. So to give you a couple of examples, with Web3, a lot of the LVMH brands experimented, including kind of communities, NFTs, and so the one thing that we are keeping is this idea of digital product passports. So using blockchain to authenticate our products, certify the provenance of all the raw materials and ingredients, and that's something that's really important to luxury, because it ties kind of our product to, you know, the blockchain. It meets a lot of regulatory kind of requirements, but again, we just don't call it an NFT, but it is an NFT, right? So that's the one nugget that stayed. Same with Metaverse. Everyone was experimenting, and two learnings that came out of that. One was a lot of our brands should go into gaming, so we have like Fenty Beauties on Roblox and doing really well. And two, we need better content that can live in these environments. And so because our brands were experimenting with Metaverse and they realized that their products didn't look good in game, they actually started doubling down on 3D digital twins and CGI. And so now we use those 3D digital twins for virtual photography. So like, for example, if you're making a watch, you are going to have a CAD file already. That's already a 3D native file. So you just build a pipeline that then renders it out so it looks like real photography. So one, you're saving money because you're not shipping samples back and forth. It's more sustainable. You're able to have that content even before the product launches, so you can train your store associates on like the watch and the movement because they can see it in 3D already. You can educate your client on it. You can actually pre-sell it, so you're not producing more than you need. So again, like this kind of conversation started because we were experimenting with Metaverse, and now it's something that's really tangible and has stuck.
I love that.
I think that that's fascinating. I will say that, like, so interestingly, so I work in a very different space about where these technologies kind of land. And so I actually think that, like, it depends. I mean, people didn't agree with me, but things like there was a period of time in which people were like, oh, blockchain is going to be the new source of governance for the internet. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. That's not what blockchain is. And if you understand what actually blockchain or encryption is, like, that doesn't make sense. And so, like, those are two words that are both on people's lips, and that is about the only thing they have in common. And so that was a frustrating hype cycle, like, to be in. And a lot of people built out kind of this idea of like, oh, well, we can use blockchain to vote, we can use blockchain to do all of these types of like, and you're seeing it again right now with trying to discover, like, to do provenance of certain types of images so that we can detect and trust, like, are we going to do watermarking? And I just had a conversation with like an intern at place that I work that was like, I have a lot of faith in like this new ability of a new type of camera to take a picture of something and embed in the actual image file, like some type of provenance kind of structure. And he was like, I think that this is going to like revolutionize how we view and trust like images. Like, you'll be able to know that it's real. I'm like, you can't see how that's broken by a screenshot of that, that is really great for if you want to sell that exact image and verify in the same way that you described the use of the blockchain in like your materials, that exact image. That's not the public trust problem that we have. Like, the public trust problem is that exact image, that's actually like a doable problem. That's good for evidence in court or something to that extent. It is not good for knowing, like, because the image quickly becomes disembodied from that original image. Like, that's just not how images work. And so anyways, I think that there is, like, I think that, like, I actually kind of wish we would move through the hype cycles faster. and I feel very strongly about that. And I wish that there was a little more questioning of definitions of, like you were saying before, like, when we were speaking about AI, what are we speaking about? That has also been a frustrating kind of moment in the last kind of 2 years.
All right, so experimentation, critical questions, both things that are going to help us navigate whatever this future ends up looking like. Thank you, everybody. Join me for thanking our panelists, Nellie and Kate. And we have a couple minutes for questions. So if there are folks with questions, we can get you a mic. We'll steal one of these. Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
I've got a question for both. One, Kate, you were just saying about blockchain. They're talking already about corporations being online. So retail could be online. They could use robots. They could use bots. They could use people all over the world through a distributed, decentralized network. And you'll have corporations that are maybe built on, I mean, this isn't tomorrow, but in 3 years, 4 years, you'll have a corporation on the actual blockchain that is distributed between agents and robots and people all over the world working together for the corporation. And for Nelly, I was wondering also there's a whole discussion on Web3 going to Web4 already, especially in Brussels, concerned about the online-offline environments going from I'm doing shopping at home, e-commerce, and then when I get into the store, I'm already way down the funnel. I'm already almost to the conversion, and you're going to be knowing what I was looking for. And have an idea of what to show me. And there's where you can actually do the middle-to-middle agent with a salesperson helping me actually find those last and articulate my taste based on my browsing profile when I was at home. So those are the two questions I've got.
Yeah. So that is honestly the dream. We're still trying to achieve that, but it's very interesting because I think when you have these futures, even like your example with the camera or this example of you walk into the store and you're known, there are so many practical roadblocks to achieving all of that. And so that's where it becomes an issue. And then also there's legal, right? Like there are certain things that you can't collect, thank God, about the consumer. You can't track. And so oftentimes you have these beautiful ideas and then in reality, everything just kind of slows down because you can't really do it. And then there's just normal human things that you kind of need to play out to understand where it breaks. So like, for example, maybe it was your personal stylist or your sister browsing, and then they send you a link or a screenshot to your WhatsApp, and then like, oh, next time you're in Paris, go to the store and check out this bag. So you walk into the store, it's your first time there, so everything before that was actually not you, right? So there's a lot of complexities in how we operate. And I think it's impossible to think that you can kind of have a digital kind of parallel to it all. And so you just need to design for those kind of moments. And again, this is where a really good, really well-trained client advisor becomes really key, right? Because they are the ones who will like pick up on what you're trying to do and then finally close the sale. So for us, again, investing in people is literally the number one thing, right? Yeah.
I love that. Are there other questions? Oh, do there a second? You want to take the second question?
I was going to just quickly say that to this point, that I actually think, I think that there is this really interesting question that I talk to my students about all the time, which is like, how do we define like what we used to call cyberspace, and how do we define what I like to call like kind of the physicality of the words, meat space. Like how do you define this world that exists between these two things? And one of the things that to this exact example of like how you move from a cyberspace to a meat space, but like. This has always been like we are never in just one. It is not as if like you are not in your computer, right? You're not in your computer, whether you're in the metaverse or whatever, you're still in a physical space. What happens to you when you read a story, or when you are in metaverse, or when you're shopping and they get it wrong, or something like that, affects your physical being and makes you feel real feelings. This is something that we've been trying to say about like online harassment and hate speech and like all of these types of things for forever. And it's not a new thing to any type of like, there is this othering that we do because all of the digital, like because of computer. Like, right? Like there is like computer. And so we like are like, all right, that is going to be something different. But it's not. It's just storytelling again. It's just a certain type of narrative again. It's just a certain type of structure again. And I do think that it has been a very fast, like, 45 years since the development of the computer and 25 years since the development in mass, like, of a consumer internet. But that eventually kind of we will understand that these things are are unified in a way that we don't understand now.
A question there in the back. We've got a microphone coming for you.
Hi, I really enjoyed your panel, and I like the idea of having this play between aesthetic and technology, taste, and I guess like intention. And I wanted to ask a question from both a designer perspective as well as a consumer perspective, how you balance the exposure to different diverse like aesthetics or domains to develop taste, but also follow algorithmic kind of recommendations, and how you do that from a design perspective as well as a consumer perspective. So to anchor that, as you look at things like Instagram, it flings a lot of content at you, and that is a medium for you to develop taste, but then at the same time, it's very curated. Or when you opt into things like Twitter or Blue Sky, you get a lot of content thrown at you, but then you're not necessarily developing that taste. Or how do you balance that from consumer as well as designer to, I guess, introduce stochasticism or like randomness to get to that?
Yeah, I think that's
You
kind
wanna
of one.
take that?
One
Yeah.
of the things that you were trying to express. I think so. From a designer standpoint, I think it is a little easier. I think a lot of kind of our creative directors tend to really seek inspiration from multiple sources. They're actually probably the least online people that you'll ever meet. And so they spend a lot of their times in the archives looking at like reference photos, looking at, embroidery patterns that a previous creative director was using, looking at house codes, going to art galleries, looking at painting. So the sources of inspiration are coming from all over the world rather than the internet, but at the same time, they also do need to be kind of plugged into kind of culture and what is going on. And oftentimes that culture actually comes from people of color, which is really interesting. So a lot of trends tend to be created on the edges, and then the really smart people will then be so in tune with it and will pick them out and then bring that into what they create, and then you have a trend. From a consumer standpoint, I do think we're a little bit screwed. There is a reason why there are so many micro trends. Like everything is an aesthetic, and you just have all these aesthetics and talks and cores being formed also really, really quickly. So my concern is that people, one, don't have a particular taste. They kind of like the look and feel of something. They create like a capsule wardrobe, or they'll redecorate their house, and all of it will be kind of fast fashion, cheaply produced items. And then when the next trend is coming, they will try and completely kind of almost like redo everything to reflect that. So I think that's kind of one thing that we're seeing. Fortunately, there's a little bit of a pushback to that we're seeing as well. People are starting to thrift more. They're learning how to sew. They're learning how to make their own furniture. So we're starting to see kind of like a pushback towards it, but it has to be really intentional on the consumer's part. And a lot of people are not necessarily like quite there yet. I don't know if you're seeing kind of that happen.
Yeah, I think that is exactly kind of like, those are like, that is the dichotomy. And so I think that we're going to watch that kind of push and pull for a while. I think that it's gonna take a while to settle. Like this is just being like this really new kind of, and I mean, honestly, I think with the world economy right now and kind of some of the changes that are happening with tariffs and the open markets, I think there is going to be a forced change in kind of like the world that we have known that was like trending towards inevitable, constant interdependence and globalization, and kind of maybe that will force more of this kind of creativity into things and kind of change things. But yeah, I think that those are all of the right questions.
We have time for one last question. Oh, there's so many.
Yeah, wow.
There's so many all of a sudden. We're going to take you right here, and then are you willing to hang out for a little bit afterwards for questions? Okay. So we'll take one last official one, and then we can continue the conversation.
There's a lot of pressure on the last one, but thank you guys so much for the panel. I wanted to ask you a question, Nellie, about how your team thinks through some of the biases that could come up when you were conducting sort of those interviews or panels that AI is synthesizing those insights. Just kind of curious, because that reminded me almost of like the Higher View interview tooling that was known for being biased, particularly with diverse candidates. So I just want to hear how your team gets to think through those things and almost like set those guardrails and yeah.
Yeah, and I had mentioned this idea of mindset and process early on. Like, I'm a big believer in that even with the most well-intentioned teams, you can't fully avoid these biases. And so you almost need to kind of protect yourself early on. So the more diverse your team is, the higher the chances that someone will spot it. The more kind of milestones and check-ins you have, the more likely you are to find something that doesn't work. The more you have a culture of safety in your team and the ability to accept failure and say, ooh, I don't think this is working, let's slow down, the more likely you are to catch these things. Because if it's like a high pressure environment, you have to ship a product and you can't say that something's not working, chances are you're probably gonna put something out there that is not good. So again, I think there's so many factors that go into protecting yourself against this, and they're very much kind of soft skills, human factors. So I think that's where kind of, if you are in the innovation space, thinking through how do you almost protect humans from ourselves in a way by designing kind of how your team operates.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Please join me in thanking our panelists. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Nellie. And if you have, I know there were a lot of questions in the audience, so you can come up and we can ask them afterwards. Thanks, everybody. Right? Isn't she incredible? Yeah. Right? It's amazing.
Thank you. What's your name?
Christopher.
Very cool.